Hi, this is Allison Brunelli, and I am an associate trainer for Art2Ride at the foundation level, providing a full training session, part 1, 2, and 3, work in hand, lunging, and a mounted session. In this video, you are watching part 1, work in hand. Contigo has kissing spines. He has 2 former right hind suspensory injuries. He has arthritis of the lower neck, predominantly on the right side. He has had a severe injury of the right sinus, which could relate to some tightening that he displays in his mouth and jaw. And he also has a medially rotated left front. Lastly, Contigo is 18 years old, and he was ridden in a forced frame for about 11 years of his life. In this work in hand session, I noticed upon bringing Contigo out that he felt average. Some days he feels really, really good when I start him out in work in hand. Some days he feels a little stiffer than he did on this particular day, but on this particular day he felt average. He felt okay overall, except that he had some tightening in the poll and jaw. So as I work Contigo, I am working just to work him into a fluidity of movement, asking him to track up and slowly increasing the activity of the hind leg. I did a few leg yields, shallow leg yields there, leading with the outside shoulder. And upon the second leg yield, he did stretch deeper and open his mouth, his jaw, and start to release some tension. So that was good. Here, I'm going to continue to work his hind leg in a lateral movement, the leg yield, just to see if I can open up his the tightness running over his top line and into his poll and jaw a little bit more, and get him to just let that all go out the front end. And loosen up. Right about here, I asked Contigo to take a few bigger strides. Just take some longer strides, open up his hind end, and then I put him on a smaller circle. My goal is to put him into more of a shoulder 4 and ask him to step under his body a little bit more. Once again, loosening up the back. I like what I see here more so than when I first started out, and that is that wave-like motion that has been generated from picking up some activity, asking him to step a little bit further underneath his body, asking him to lengthen his stride. That energy that's been created is now pushing the energy over his top line more, and he's starting to feel a lot looser and a little bit more swingy. My aids are pretty straightforward. I've got an outside rein that helps me keep the outside shoulder from drifting. I've got my whip that I'm using to help tap his haunches to move away from me. And so in essence, I do want him stepping away from me, but also coming around the bend and creating a bend in his body. And I also have an inside rein that I use gently to supple him if he does resist. Softening in the jaw and the poll. So by using a combination of these aids, I have the ability to establish his willingness to step forward and move willingly forward, seeking the contact into a nice deep stretch to bring his back up and to loosen the muscles over his back and prepare him for both lunging and mounted work. I really enjoy how work in hand and working on the walk helps to create a very relaxed environment and helps to calm Contigo down if he's feeling any tension whatsoever. I feel that the work in hand and working on the walk and work in hand constantly is improving the quality of the relationship between Contigo and I. And I feel that that is often underestimated and sacrificed in the quest for technical perfection. Work in hand is a place where I can connect mentally and emotionally with Contigo. I can help him feel emotionally safe and comfortable, and I can actually get him to think about activity and increasing his activity level, while I'm able to also get him to feel very comfortable, safe, and relaxed. Tracking to the right on this particular day, Contigo felt the same as he did tracking to the left, a little sticky in his pole and his jaw. Just sort of, he's got that little bit of a curl happening behind the vertical. And on some days, he actually doesn't start out like that at all. So, like I did going to the left, I just take my time using some lateral exercises and some gentle softening and suppling of the inside rein to help him soften at the pole and the jaw. To help unstick that stickiness, I tend to just ask him to move away from me without falling outside that left shoulder. And then I'll do a little shallow leg yield like I just did there, even though he tripped a bit there, but I just ignore that and keep moving on. As I continue to work him in bendy lines, he's starting to loosen up a little bit, but he is still a little sticky. He hasn't been able to fully release, so I just continue to work at the shallow leg yielding like you just saw there, and the inside suppling, the suppling of the inside rein. And while you can't see it very well, I do continue to ask him for a willingness to step forward and to remain active without throwing himself over onto the forehand. And you can see he still hasn't fully released. He's still a little ways from reaching the ground with the tip of his nose. This is very common for Contigo when tracking right in the work in hand. And there he goes right there. That leg yield actually just helped him get to that release that I was looking for. I would imagine that some of his challenges here have something to do with his inside right hind and the 2 former suspensor injuries he's incurred. Probably has a little bit to do with that arthritis in the neck. When Contigo does really stretch like he's doing here, I try to really allow for it because I like the way he's opening his throat latch. I try to help him temper it just a little bit so he does not fall on his forehand. And I try to keep him as active as possible to get him to step more deeply underneath himself so that he can find the balance he needs as he stretches that deep. In other words, I like to try to keep his hind legs tracking up as much as possible so they don't get lost out behind him as he really reaches and stretches his nose out, elongating his neck. For many years, Contigo was ridden with strong contact and constraint. He was held against the rein and in a forced frame. He lost the 4-beat rhythm of his steps. There's a direct correlation between a strong hand and a blocked back and the quality of the walk, and we are basically witnessing that here today. I would imagine that much of what his roadblocks are today is not just his troubled past in training, but also the way he was ridden, but also the injuries that he incurred. My goals with Contigo in the work in hand is to establish that willingness for him to step forward and under his body to help him bring his back up and to reach for the contact. and to try to use the lateral exercises to help free up his shoulders, his haunches, and his back so that he can become more supple and strong throughout our work. Right about here in the tracking to the right, I started to ask for Contigo for a little bit more activity. I actually started tapping him with the whip a little bit more assertively and asking him also to move away from me just a little bit more. While the quote-unquote corners of the circle are a little harder for him when tracking right, probably because of that inside right hind suspensory former injury. I think that request to get a little bit more activity actually improved his walk just a little bit and got that energy to flow a little bit better throughout his body. And as he pokes his nose out more, I actually like the way that he's using his hind legs a little bit better as well. And so that is it for our work in hand for the part 1 of our full training session.